Fear is rarely announced. No one will walk up to you, look you in the eye and say, "You intimidate me." They'll never hand you that kind of power. Instead, they'll hide it behind fake politeness, slip it into small jabs, or mask it with odd patterns of avoidance. Machiavelli understood something most people still overlook. Fear is the purest, most reliable signal of dominance. It's not the ones who openly admire you that reveal your true place in the hierarchy. It's the ones who pretend not to notice you, yet track every move you make. Fear is influence without effort, and if you know how to detect it early, you can control the room before you've even spoken a word. That's where Machiavelli's early warning radar comes in, a set of subtle psychological tells that reveal someone already sees you as a threat even before they have admitted it to themselves. One sign is overcompensating with excessive politeness. At first glance, politeness looks like respect. But Machiavelli knew that true respect is calm, steady, and natural. Fear, on the other hand, often wears the mask of over-politeness. They greet you too eagerly, as if they've rehearsed friendliness. They laugh at things you say that aren't even jokes. They nod and agree with everything, even when your tone is completely neutral. This isn't respect, it's defensive submission. They're trying to get ahead of whatever they think you might do, disarming you before you've even drawn a sword. To test it mildly, disagree with them or question one of their opinions. If their politeness intensifies instead of breaking, they're not operating from genuine connection, they're operating from self-preservation. A second sign is subtle avoidance of eye contact, except when they're checking your reaction. Eye behavior is one of the clearest tells of fear. You'll notice they avoid holding your gaze for long, but they never stop looking at you entirely. They'll glance back quickly as if checking to see whether you notice something. This is classic Machiavellian territory. Fear creates an internal push-pull. They want to avoid confrontation, so they look away, but they can't stop tracking the person who intimidates them. If you're in a group, watch them when you're not speaking. They'll look at you when they think you're distracted, reading your face, your posture, your reactions. To test it, make calm eye contact without smiling. If they break it quickly, then glance back a few seconds later, you've just confirmed their unspoken anxiety. The third sign, perhaps the most revealing, is preemptive competition. Fear doesn't always make people retreat. Sometimes it makes them rush to prove they're not beneath you. They'll bring up their achievements out of nowhere, correct you on tiny details, just to prove they're knowledgeable, insert themselves into conversations you're leading, and emphasize similarities with you as if to say, "I'm on your level." This isn't normal competition. This is preemptive self-defense. They sense you have the upper hand, and they're scrambling to close the gap before it becomes obvious to everyone else. To test it, mention something subtle about your work experience or influence, then pause. If they instantly counter with a parallel achievement, you're not having casual conversation, you're watching fear try to disguise itself as equality. The fourth sign is a shift in group dynamics when you enter the room. Machiavelli observed that power doesn't just live in individuals, it shifts the behavior of the crowd. If someone fears you, you'll notice subtle changes in their tone, posture, or choice of words the moment you appear. Conversations they were leading may trail off, or they'll change topics entirely. Laughter might die down, replaced with more measured speech. They're recalibrating, adjusting to the new hierarchy your presence imposes. You might also see them physically reposition themselves, either moving closer to keep tabs on you, or farther away to avoid direct engagement. This repositioning is rarely conscious, it's instinctive. It's a territorial adjustment, much like animals in the wild. If they move closer, it's not always friendliness, it could be surveillance. If they move away, it's not always dislike, it could be caution. The fifth sign is how they react when you make mistakes. Normally, people will either overlook minor errors or offer casual corrections. But someone who fears you will treat your mistakes like precious currency. They'll file them away, waiting for a moment when pointing it out benefits them. And when that moment comes, their delivery will be controlled, never too aggressive, never too obvious, but just sharp enough to chip at your image without triggering open conflict. This tactic is particularly Machiavellian because it's an indirect strike. They avoid challenging you head-on, but they still attempt to erode your authority in the eyes of others. To detect this, pay attention to patterns. If they always seem to innocently bring up your past errors at strategic moments, it's not coincidence, it's calculated positioning. The sixth sign is a curious mix of imitation and contradiction. People who fear you often can't decide whether to align with you or oppose you. On one hand, they'll mimic aspects of your style language or approach because they subconsciously associate your way of operating with influence. On the other hand, they'll contradict you in areas where they think they can win small battles just to prove they're not entirely under your shadow. This is the fear dynamic at work. It's unstable, contradictory, and often confusing to watch. But to the trained eye, it's easy to spot the person who both copies and resists you is someone who hasn't yet decided whether their best chance of survival is alliance or opposition. Finally, the seventh sign, they try to control your access to information. In Machiavelli's world, controlling the flow of information was a core power tactic. Someone who fears you may withhold useful details, delay sharing updates, or forget to include you in certain conversations. The goal isn't to completely block you, it's to slow you down to make you operate with less clarity than they have. You'll notice this when you consistently hear about decisions after they've already been made or have to ask multiple times to get a straight answer. It's subtle sabotage wrapped in plausible deniability. And once you recognize it, you realize it's less about the information itself and more about the message you're not fully in control here. The eighth sign is the public test. This is when someone who fears you attempts to challenge you in front of others, not because they're confident, but because they're hoping to shift the social balance in their favor. Machiavelli knew this move well. It's the calculated gamble of a weaker player trying to undermine a stronger one without going to war. A public test might come as a joke at your expense, a loaded question during a meeting, or a subtle dig in a group conversation. The aim isn't to destroy you, it's to see if they can make you stumble. If you react defensively or over-explain, you've given them a small victory. If you laugh too hard to fit in, you signal that you feel the sting. Either way, they get feedback on how easy it might be to destabilize you next time. To neutralize this, you don't try to win the moment, you own it. Keep your posture steady, your tone calm, and if you respond, make it concise. Sometimes the most powerful move is to let the attempt hang in the air until it loses its force. Other times, a single understated remark can shift the spotlight back to them. You've been saving that one for a while, haven't you? This doesn't attack, it exposes. The ninth sign is sudden withdrawal after a perceived loss. If someone tries to one-up you, challenge you, or test you, and it doesn't go their way, they might retreat entirely for a while. They'll stop engaging in conversation, skip meetings where you're present, or avoid direct contact. On the surface, it looks like disinterest, but underneath it's regrouping. They're recalculating their approach, deciding whether to try again, shift tactics, or abandon the game altogether. This retreat can be an opportunity for you to solidify your position. Machiavelli advised that when an opponent withdraws, you don't chase them, you let them feel the distance. The absence reinforces the gap in power, making them think twice before stepping forward again. The 10th sign is the subtle spread of narratives. A person who fears you might not attack you directly, but they may seed small comments to others that cast you in a certain light, too ambitious, too confident, too cold. These aren't accusations. They're impressions designed to soften your image in the eyes of the group, to make your influence less absolute. The brilliance and danger of this tactic is that it rarely looks like malice. It comes disguised as casual conversation or concern. Oh, they're great, but sometimes they can be a bit intense. It's poison delivered in drops small enough to avoid detection, but steady enough to shift perception over time. Recognizing this is crucial because perception is the battlefield you often don't see. Machiavelli's warning was clear: once someone else controls the story about you, they control the frame through which others see you. And the longer that frame stands unchallenged, the harder it is to break. The 11th sign is what I call the shadow presence. Someone who fears you will often place themselves close enough to observe you, but far enough to avoid direct interaction. In social settings, they'll hover at the edges of your conversations. In professional spaces, they'll linger in the same area without engaging. This isn't coincidence, it's reconnaissance. They want to gather as much information as possible about how you operate, who you connect with, and what you say, but without revealing too much of themselves in the process. This kind of shadowing is usually subconscious, but for a Machiavellian, it's a tell. Fear breeds vigilance. When someone feels threatened by you, they monitor you not just to anticipate your moves, but to prepare their own. You'll often notice this when their physical proximity doesn't match the social connection you have. They're near you more often than makes sense, yet somehow they never fully engage. The 12th sign is the sudden appearance of alliances. Fear pushes people to find backup. If someone sees you as a threat, they may start aligning themselves more closely with others, especially those they believe can counterbalance your influence. This can show up as them spending more time with your rivals, agreeing with people they previously disagreed with, or publicly supporting positions they don't fully believe in, just to strengthen their network. These alliances are rarely about genuine friendship. They're insurance policies. In Machiavelli's terms, this is securing fortifications before the siege begins. When you see someone building new relationships quickly after a tension point with you, it's worth noting who they're connecting with and why. The 13th sign is subtle mirroring, followed by contrast. This one is particularly manipulative. They'll imitate aspects of your communication style, humor, or approach to make others see similarities between you, then strategically highlight differences to position themselves as the better version. It's a double play gain, some of your authority by association, then attempt to eclipse it. To spot this, watch for patterns where someone seems to echo your style when speaking after you, but then pivots into criticism or refinements of your ideas. They're borrowing your frame, then repainting it in their own colors. The 14th sign is resource control. This is when someone who fears you quietly manages access to tools, opportunities, or people in ways that limit your reach. They'll forget to pass along invitations, hold back introductions, or delay sharing information until the last possible moment. The aim is to make you less effective without openly opposing you. In Machiavelli's time, controlling the flow of goods and resources was a way to weaken an enemy without engaging in direct conflict. In today's world, the resources are information, connections, and timing. Watch for moments when someone consistently has the ability to include you in opportunities, but somehow never does, especially if their excuse is always wrapped in a smile. The 15th sign is performative confidence. Fear often hides behind exaggerated displays of strength. They may speak louder than usual around you, dominate conversations you're part of, or go out of their way to show they're unshaken. But real confidence doesn't need to be performed, it's steady and unforced. This overcompensation is meant more for the audience than for you, but it's still a clear signal your presence has altered their behavior. The 16th sign is selective memory. Someone who fears you might forget moments that put you in a strong position, while recalling with perfect clarity any moment that could be used to diminish you. This isn't about genuine lapses, it's a strategic choice. They'll omit your contributions when retelling events, skip over your role in successes, and downplay your influence in shared accomplishments. This tactic is subtle but corrosive. Over time, it erodes how others remember your role, especially if you're not actively controlling the narrative yourself. Machiavelli would warn that allowing someone else to be the historian of your actions is inviting them to rewrite your legacy. The 17th sign is strategic disagreement. While healthy disagreement is natural, someone who fears you may pick moments to oppose you, not because they truly believe in their stance, but because they see value in publicly challenging you. The aim isn't to win the argument, it's to create the perception that you're not unchallenged. These disagreements often come at high visibility moments, meetings, group discussions, public forums. They may be polite, even framed as just offering another perspective, but the timing is intentional. It's a soft power play designed to show others that you can be questioned. The 18th sign is the support trap. They'll offer help or assistance in a way that positions them as a gatekeeper. On the surface, it looks generous. They're lending resources, providing information, or connecting you to people. But in reality, the help comes with an unspoken condition you now owe them. And when someone fears your power, having you indebted to them, even in a small way, gives them psychological leverage. Machiavelli often used this tactic in reverse, offering aid to rivals in ways that subtly bound them to his influence. The key here is to recognize when support is a genuine act versus when it's a calculated attempt to reset the balance of power. The 19th sign is exaggerated praise in public. Compliments are normal, but when someone consistently overpraises you in front of others, it can be a double-edged sword. It draws attention to you, yes, but it can also frame you as someone under constant scrutiny. Over time, it can set you up for a fall by inflating expectations or making your success look like the result of favoritism. This is the kind of move Machiavelli would classify as praise that imprisons. The applause feels good in the moment, but it subtly shapes how others view you, less as an equal and more as a figure who must constantly prove they deserve the pedestal they've been placed on. The 20th sign is information overload. This is when they bury you in unnecessary details updates or data not to help you, but to dilute your focus. It's a form of distraction, keeping you so busy sorting through the noise that you have less time to act strategically. It's the opposite of withholding information. Instead, it's weaponizing excess. A Machiavellian mind sees through this quickly. In politics and power games, the flood of irrelevant information is a classic tactic to keep strong players reactive instead of proactive. The best counter is to filter ruthlessly and refuse to engage with anything that doesn't directly serve your objectives. The 21st sign is the subtle undermining of your relationships. Someone who fears you may not attack you directly. They'll focus on the people around you instead. This could be as small as sowing doubt in casual conversations. Do you think they're really as committed as they seem, or as large as quietly discouraging others from collaborating with you? Their goal is to weaken your network so that your influence is isolated, making you easier to contain. Machiavelli understood this well. In The Prince, he noted that destabilizing an opponent's alliances often mattered more than confronting the opponent themselves. If you can erode their foundation, you don't have to knock down the structure, it will collapse on its own. The 22nd sign is shifting credit. They'll align themselves with your successes just enough to make it seem like they were an essential part of it without ever fully acknowledging your role. This works especially well in group settings where memories blur and people assume the person telling the story must have played a central part. Over time, it creates a narrative where your wins are shared even if the real work was yours. The 23rd sign is selective silence. This is different from avoiding eye contact or staying out of conversations. Selective silence happens when they deliberately withhold responses in situations where a timely acknowledgement from them would benefit you. It might be ignoring your idea in a meeting until someone else repeats it. It might be failing to confirm something in public that they've already agreed to in private. The silence isn't accidental. It's meant to make you appear unsupported or uncertain. The 24th sign is opportunistic timing. When they see you in a vulnerable or distracted state, they'll choose that exact moment to bring up disagreements, make requests, or test boundaries. Machiavelli taught that the timing of a move often matters more than the move itself. Striking when the other side is unprepared maximizes the impact with minimal effort. The 25th sign is excessive observation, disguised as curiosity. They'll ask seemingly innocent questions about your plans, your methods, or your connections, framing it as genuine interest. But over time, the pattern becomes clear. They're gathering intel, not engaging in friendly conversation. The 26th sign is controlling the emotional tone. In a group, they might attempt to steer conversations toward topics where you're less confident or away from areas where you excel. This isn't always obvious. It can be as subtle as shifting a meeting's mood from serious to playful right before you speak, undercutting the weight of your contribution. Machiavelli would call this soft sabotage, influencing the environment rather than confronting the individual. It's harder to detect but incredibly effective because it doesn't leave fingerprints. The 27th sign is sudden over-inclusion. This happens when someone who fears you suddenly starts inviting you to every discussion, every decision, every meeting, not out of respect, but to keep you constantly visible and under scrutiny. By putting you in the spotlight too often, they hope you'll slip, overcommit, or burn out. This is the inverse of exclusion. It's strategic exposure. And just like with exclusion, the key is to notice the intent behind the pattern, not just the surface action. The 28th sign is indirect provocation. Someone who fears you might not challenge you head on. Instead, they'll make remarks to others that they know will eventually get back to you. These comments are carefully crafted, not so blatant that they look like an attack, but sharp enough to provoke a reaction if you're not careful. Their goal is to make you come to them, which puts you in the position of the pursuer rather than the one in control. The 29th sign is calculated flattery. While flattery often looks like a harmless ego boost in the hands of someone who fears you, it can be a manipulation tool. They'll use it to lower your guard, making you more likely to share information, overlook small transgressions, or grant them access they otherwise wouldn't have. Machiavelli warned that men are less cautious when they are being pleased, and this tactic plays directly into that weakness. The 30th sign is resource positioning. This is when they strategically place themselves between you and something or someone you need. They might volunteer to handle communication with a key contact or offer to manage a shared project. On paper, it looks like initiative. In reality, it's a way to monitor, filter, and control the flow between you and your objective. The 31st sign is coordinated absence. If you've ever noticed certain people conveniently missing when your influence or presence could be most effective, important meetings, group decisions, public moments, that's not always coincidence. Sometimes it's intentional, a way of avoiding being publicly aligned with you while still benefiting from your work in private. This allows them to dodge any perception of being in your shadow. The 32nd sign is pattern disruption. When you've established a rhythm or momentum, whether in a project, a conversation, or even social standing, they'll introduce something that forces you to shift gears. This could be an unexpected question, an unrelated task, or a sudden change of topic. The goal is to break your flow because momentum is one of the strongest psychological advantages you can have. The 33rd sign is the reluctant ally performance. They'll publicly show a degree of cooperation with you, agreeing with certain points, supporting certain moves, but in a way that signals to others that they're doing it begrudgingly. This keeps them from appearing openly opposed while still communicating distance. The 34th sign is testing the boundaries of your patience. This could be through small delays, minor mistakes, or repeated misunderstandings. None of these actions are severe enough to warrant an outright confrontation, but together they're meant to gauge how easily you can be irritated or thrown off balance. Machiavelli understood that a leader who can be provoked into overreaction loses control of the frame. That's why these micro-tests matter. They're not just about the moment, they're about mapping your tolerance. The 35th sign is leveraging third parties. Instead of confronting you directly, someone who fears you might communicate through others, passing along messages, making requests, or delivering critiques via intermediaries. This gives them plausible deniability while still exerting influence. If questioned, they can always say, "Oh, I was just asking," through them, distancing themselves from the intent. The 36th sign is the mistaken reveal. They might accidentally share something about you in public, a private comment, a personal detail, or an internal decision, framing it as an innocent slip. But if you notice these slips always happen in ways that shift perception or invite scrutiny, you're seeing calculated exposure. Machiavelli noted that revealing selective truths at the right moment can weaken an opponent without a single overt attack. The 37th sign is narrative redirection. If you're gaining attention for a success, they may subtly shift conversation to something else, either highlighting another person's achievement or bringing up an unrelated issue that pulls focus away from you. The aim isn't to discredit you, it's to dilute the impact of your moment. The 38th sign is artificial urgency. They'll push you to make quick decisions, often under the guise of helping or keeping things moving. But urgency is a pressure tactic. It limits your ability to think strategically, increasing the odds you'll make a misstep. A Machiavellian response is to slow the pace, deliberately refusing to be rushed, even if it means letting the moment pass. The 39th sign is selective amplification. They'll take one small flaw, misstep, or offhand remark and make it seem bigger than it is, not necessarily by exaggerating it, but by repeating it in multiple contexts so it stays alive longer than it should. It's not outright slander, it's keeping a blemish visible until it sticks in people's minds. The 40th sign is tactical deference. They might agree with you openly or even defer to your judgment in public, only to later undermine those same decisions quietly. This creates a dual image. In front of you, they appear supportive. Behind you, they plant seeds of doubt. The 41st sign is the creation of false equivalence. They'll draw parallels between your work or behavior and that of someone less respected, subtly implying you're not as exceptional as others believe. This works especially well if they compare you to a known rival or to a stereotype people already have reservations about. The 42nd sign is emotional baiting. They'll deliberately touch on topics they know are sensitive for you, not necessarily to cause pain, but to elicit a reaction that others can witness. If you take the bait, they get confirmation on how to push you in the future. If you don't, you reinforce your image as unshakable. The 43rd sign is the help that hurts. They'll offer assistance that seems generous, but is designed to subtly undermine you, either by making you look dependent or by ensuring the outcome falls short of your standards. On the surface, it's framed as support. Underneath, it's an intentional compromise of your position. The 44th sign is quiet resistance. They won't openly refuse to follow your lead, but they'll delay action, forget steps, or execute tasks in a way that forces you to step in and fix things. Each small instance seems harmless, but over time it paints you as reactive rather than proactive. Machiavelli understood that eroding a leader's perceived efficiency can be more damaging than confronting them outright. The 45th sign is engineered dependence. They'll structure situations so that you have to go through them for access resources or approvals. This makes them a bottleneck, giving them the ability to control pace and flow while framing it as just doing their job. The longer this structure stays in place, the more it feels like their presence is essential, even if it's actually limiting you. The 46th sign is framing your restraint as weakness. When you choose not to respond to a provocation, they may spin it as avoidance or inability. They'll present your silence as proof that you've conceded the point or lack the confidence to address it. This is why Machiavelli advised pairing silence with visible control so observers see it as discipline, not surrender. The 47th sign is planting doubt through hypotheticals. Instead of making direct accusations, they'll pose questions to others like, what if they're not as committed as they seem? Or what if they're doing this for personal gain? Hypotheticals are harder to counter because they're not claims, they're just ideas, yet they can stick in people's minds as if they were facts. The 48th sign is the calculated retreat. After pushing boundaries or testing you repeatedly, they may back off entirely, not out of respect, but to wait for the right moment to re-engage. This lull can make you drop your guard, creating the perfect setup for a stronger, more strategic strike later. Machiavelli's core principle threads through all of these. Fear is not just an emotion, it's a strategy. When someone fears you, every move they make around you is calculated. Sometimes it's defensive, sometimes it's offensive, but it's never random. And here's the crucial takeaway: you don't need to confront every sign. The true power move isn't in reacting, it's in recognizing the game while continuing to operate on your terms. The moment you can see these patterns without being pulled into them, you shift from being a piece on the board to the one controlling the board. That's the space Machiavelli wanted you to occupy, calm, aware, and unmovable. Where their fear no longer surprises you and their tactics no longer touch you. Where you don't just survive the game, you set the rules.